We'd like to open the floor to any questions before we take a break for our panel. Sarah, you might have been fielding some in the chat already.
Yeah, we have a couple to get going with if we're ready to start, Marianne, yeah?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank you. So the first question came in from Clara, and Clara wanted to ask Leah if you'd had the opportunity to link up with garment workers in the Global South as part of the project. So Leah, can you take that one for us?
Yeah, the only connection we have is that we've been selling hats that we've made from Bags for Life, and the proceeds we're giving to Avage, which is a female garment workers-led campaign to increase working conditions for women there. But I mean, it's a fascinating question, because obviously that is part of fast fashion, the split between the consumer and the producer. And I mean, that's kind of capitalism, isn't it? And so that would be a great next step. But at the moment, we're unfunded and it's a local campaign. So
really interesting, and thank you for that. What a great project. The art was so beautiful as well. Fashion was just so beautiful. We have another question in, one from Lindy this time, and another really project specific one for Rowan. And that's if you find a difference between remand prisoners, between the engagement of remand prisoners and the CAT B and C prisoners as they're in transit, so to speak, was the question. Does that make sense, or have I asked it badly?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Perfect.
So yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I think the short answer is yes. I think you get differences in different prisons and with different populations anyway, but I think very much in terms of people, and we have to bear in mind that at the moment, thanks to the delights of COVID, we have got remand prisoners who some of them have been on remand for 2 years without ever having been to court. So they are people who are serving effectively quite long sentences without having been found guilty yet. And that obviously in itself has a huge impact in somebody's ability to engage with any sort of project. We often find that people do engage very positively with the theatre company, but there is more of a, am I still going to be in by the time we perform? What's going to happen? And it's much more disconnected and often chaotic, and that's one of the things that is difficult to work with, but obviously in some senses makes the work every bit as important, if quite different, to working with people serving long sentences, who maybe know they will be in for often a decade or more, or in some instances 3 or more decades before they're considered eligible for parole.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. We have a question that any of you are welcome to take. This one's come in from, sorry, I've lost who it came in from. Somebody wonderful with a great question of how you go about measuring your impact. Anybody want to take that and kick us off with it? I'm sure you've all got totally different responses. Thank you, lovely Natalia. Let's have you first.
Thank you. So I'm a sociologist, so I'm used to measuring the impact. Yeah, we have a survey that it's available online for anyone who wants to share with us their experiences, and that's the only requirement we have. So for example, this time that it will be played for the first time, the university who asked for it, we agreed to give it to the university as long as they add the survey to the dynamic of playing the bingo. So yeah, we have a survey and we check those results. Yeah, I will be as sociologist as possible with it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to take that one?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share from my side of things, because I'm obviously part practitioner, part academic. So I actually wrote my PhD thesis on working with Shakespeare with marginalised communities. So much wider than just the prison setting, people with mental health issues, learning disabilities, homelessness, substance misuse issues, etc. So for me, it's been a combination of predominantly qualitative long-term ethnographic study. So I've worked with people over 2, 3 or 4 years, rehearsal diaries, feedback from participants, feedback from staff, feedback from families who come in for productions, but also designing some questionnaires, which are very similar to actually what the HMPPS, so the prison service then designed as their outcome tool, and looking at the impact of work like this. So that has obviously been written up into my PhD thesis, and there will be a book forthcoming in the Arden Shakespeare and Social Justice series, hopefully later this year if the manuscript gets in on time. But I think actually that the social justice series would probably be of interest to an awful lot of the people involved in this conversation more widely.
Is there a link that you could share with us, Rowan, to that series?
I will have a look for one and share it. Yeah, there's the handbook came out as the starter for that, and then this was the first commissioned book in the series. So it's very, very new. The handbook came out just over a year ago, but I'll see if I can find the link and drop it in the chat.
That's great. And I'm going to come to Rachel next, and then I don't know if any of the others want to take this one, but just while I'm thinking about it, we actually co-ran a session last week, a training session on designing projects with social impact, and all of the resources that we reference through that training are in the Centre for Excellence library. So if people are interested in looking at different toolkits and different ways of measuring, do have a look in the Centre for Excellence library, because there's lots of stuff there. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's come to Rachel. What is your take on it?
Well, less formally, but I suppose one of the results that we may or may not see is if the campaign is successful, if Greenwich Council agree to the asks, and I think if they do, and we don't know how long it'll take, but if they do, then an interesting conversation with them would be to say, what part did the film of The Shoe Shop, that performance, play in helping you to reach your decision? But just in terms of as a kind of critical friend, I sat with the women afterwards and talked to them. We had a conversation, and I just simply asked them, because one of my big questions was, how co-created is this? You know, we all know about coming in as outsiders and taking work and making work and reaping the benefits for ourselves and all those things that we don't like in this field. And I simply said, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, if 1 is Rachel came in and made you make a piece of theatre that she had an idea for, and 10 is I've made a piece of performance and I've made for my campaign, which would you say? And happily, every one of them said 9 or 10. So I simply asked that question. And that's another way. So there's not an ethnographic study, but equally, I have to say that we weren't confined by funding. Sadly, there wasn't any, but at the same time, then the evaluation is the questions that we want to ask of ourselves in that process.
That's great, Rachel. Thank you. And you could see every bit of ownership in the film. You'll see it when you watch. Rowan, thank you so much for sharing those things in the chat there. And I think Natalia has also shared something. I'm just wondering if anybody else wanted to come in on that question.
Yeah,
Emma, thank
is
you.
That all right? Yeah, ours is. So we had surveys and QR codes. It's all very fancy for the different participants, but we also have our own. That's sort of the outward facing stuff, but we also have working with children, that absolute responsibility that we felt to tell those stories. So we had a showing of the piece. It was just for those that had participated in it and their families, and that was really important to us, and we insisted that the theatre did that, and we're going to insist on that in the tour as well. That's part of, if you want to be involved in the tour, you have to have those families, and also a soft exit for them, so they're not shoved out of the theatre afterwards. And the Unity Theatre are excellent, so they supported that fully. But I suppose our measure was having to face those kids after the show and going like, did we get it right? Do you know what I mean? And Aaron, one of the lads, was like, yeah, that was good, that. And I was like, wicked. Okay, I can sleep tonight. I got it. That was good. That I done it.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It comes back to that narrative. It's that story.
Absolutely.
And that is how we measure it. And yes, there are much more scientific methods, and there are methodologies that apply to the different sectors that we work congruently with. But when it comes down to it, it is what level of engagement, what level of ownership.
And we'll all know that. We'll all know it was that little hug that we got at the end, or that little nod from someone, or that, and that's important. Yeah.
Lee, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, we did have an evaluation, an external evaluation, but what was more important is exactly what you said, which is the the anecdotal, the personal being political. And, just women saying, I had no idea that what I do in my everyday purchasing is having such an impact on women in the global south. I'm not going to do it anymore. Or, how can I learn to repair my clothes? And I suppose the greatest evaluation, that the payoff would be if Primark closes. I mean, it's not about, but do you know what I mean? It's like, if we could really, that's going to be the next challenge, is how you reach women who do actually make the choice to buy fast fashion without demonizing them, and actually hearing their stories. So I'm into the stories.
I've got one question, because we've got no more in the chat just at the moment, but please do add more all the time. But I'm going to take the chance to just ask one, and it is around that. You're saying, we want Primark to close, that would be it, that would be success. And, for Collective Encounters, capitalism falls, that's success. And we, is replaced by an egalitarian society. So how we measure movement towards those goals is really important incrementally, I think, to sustain us in that fight, isn't it? And one of the things that struck me, particularly about, about all of the work, but particularly about Rachel and Emma's projects, was the very specific, neat ask that there was in terms of the social change. So there's a real clear understanding of, this is these are the two things that we want from this campaign, or this is, just think about the children. It's that kind of clarity. And I just wondered if anybody had thoughts about that, about the kind of complex and simple asks in social change art.
I think that's one of the things I've learned from community organising, and that's why doing this work in the centre of where the two meet is so helpful. Yes, we want temporary accommodation to be suitable and comfortable and proper and fair for everyone. Going to ask that of the council is daft. It's not going to happen. And so within organising, one of the methods is that you look at what is winnable. So this ask of Wi-Fi or a 4-week notice period is very tangible, and we think possibly winnable. And of course, then with the small wins, you build and build to the bigger wins. So it really is embedded into the heart of community organising, and I'm grateful to have learned that, and we'll be applying it in other work as well.
Good learning. Thank you. Anybody else, or any more questions either?
So of course our goal would be to destroy or to stop all these concepts that we got, feminicides and gender-based violence. But like an easier one would be that feminist protest, stop being criminalized. And of course, in the long term, to destroy patriarchy and neoliberal capitalism that it's linked to patriarchy, especially in countries like Mexico and the whole global south. Yeah, that would be the goal. Yeah.
Thank you. Brilliant. Any more questions?
There was one question in the chat from Matthew Elliott.
Aha!
Hi, Matty. Which is for Dr. Rowan, and was why Shakespeare?
Oh, $1 million question. Why not Shakespeare? I think, being sensible for a second, there's probably two parts to that answer. For me, there's the whole, Shakespeare's characters are so rich and multifaceted and multi-layered, and you can do a huge amount. I could talk for hours about the benefits of working with characters whom people then start to identify with and pick out bits that they self-identify with, etc. But I think the other thing for me is taking the cultural capital, to steal a term from Bordeaux, the cultural capital of Shakespeare, and the way that it's often been used for people to sort of to uphold the patriarchy and to uphold the kind of dominant white male regime. And actually, there's something amazingly satisfying about taking that and inverting it and using it to empower marginalized communities, whether those be people in prison, whether those be people who have a history of substance misuse, or whether they be people with learning disabilities that have often been told that Shakespeare isn't for them, and for them to discover that actually not only is it for them, but they can use it to find their own voice and to tell a story that's never been told before is amazingly powerful and beautiful to watch.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
an excellent answer. Thank you so much. Well, I think unless there's anything burning, we have one, I think. Oh no, it's just lovely comments and appreciation. Do take the chance to read through the chat presenters. You've had lots of lovely people saying good things about you. We'll also, Marianne, I think usually saves the chats, and don't you, and sends them out. Yep, great. So if you do have any more questions, you can always save them. We can come to them at the end if you think of anything else during the break. But I'm going to hand over to Marianne now, and we'll move on.
Great, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again to the presenters in the first half of today's event. And we've got plenty more to come. It was really wonderful for you to kick us off. What we're going to do now is take a short break, maybe 10 minutes, grab a cuppa, and come back at about 8:35, and we'll get started again with our round 2. So thank you, everyone, and see you soon.